Nani?
Right now, humans have so much salt that we'll sit there and lie to someone we love rather than admit the food is too salty. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when salt was worth more than gold, when people went to war over it, when a handful of it changed the course of history. This is that story. Your heart is beating, your muscles are working, your brain is processing information. All of that requires salt to function. Not need it like you need your morning coffee, but need it in the way that without it, your body starts shutting down. Heart beats irregularly, muscles cramp, brain loses control, and eventually, you die. And yet, your ancestors had to walk for days, cross deserts, climb mountains, and ford rivers just to find enough of it. People living near the ocean had it easier. They could boil seawater and collect the crystals left behind. But people living inland, they had to travel to underground salt mines, essentially ancient dried-up ocean floors millions of years old, or find salt lakes and salt springs, then boil pots of water just to extract a few grams. Here's something fascinating. Archaeologists track ancient human settlements by following salt. Wherever there was a salt mine or a salt lake, there were people. Salt didn't just feed civilizations, it determined where they were built. And for those who had no salt source nearby, they had to buy it, which is why salt became the most important trade commodity in the ancient world. Salt trade routes became the backbone of entire economies. Cities that sat on those routes grew rich. Empires that controlled the supply controlled everything. And no empire understood that better than Rome. The Romans built an entire road just to transport salt from the coast into the interior, called the Via Salaria, literally the Salt Road. Salt was so critical that the Roman army created a dedicated allowance specifically for soldiers to buy salt during long campaigns, called the salarium. Over time, salarium came to mean a soldier's entire pay, then anyone's pay, then every working person's income. The English word salary, the thing you ask your boss to increase, comes directly from the Latin word for salt money paid to Roman soldiers 2,000 years ago. That word survived the fall of the entire Roman Empire and is still being used every single payday. Not bad for a seasoning. Rome wasn't the only empire that understood salt's power. Venice, a small city built on marshes in northeastern Italy, became one of the most powerful commercial empires in medieval Europe. Not because of its army, not because of its land, because it controlled the salt supply for much of Europe. Venice bought salt cheap in one place, sold it expensive in another, and used the profits to build the largest merchant fleet in the world. Salt was the foundation of the entire Venetian Empire. And when something becomes that valuable, what does the government do? Tax it. In 1340, King Philippe VI of France decided the state would monopolize all salt production and sales across France. Every citizen, including children as young as 8, was required to buy a minimum amount of salt each year from government stores, at government-set prices. This tax was called the gabelle. And here's the insane part. The price of salt wasn't the same across France. The same amount of salt cost 10 times more in Paris than in the south. Not because the salt was different, but because the government wanted it that way. Nobility and clergy? Fully exempt. Regular people? Pay up. The result was predictable. Rampant salt smuggling. In the years before the French Revolution, over 3,700 people were arrested for possessing contraband salt. Caught without weapons, prison. Caught with weapons, execution, executed for smuggling salt. People added the gabelle to their list of things that needed to change. And in 1789, they had a revolution. The gabelle was abolished in 1790. Napoleon reinstated it in 1806 to fund his military campaigns. And France's salt tax didn't fully disappear until 1945. After World War II. 600 years. One salt tax. It survived a revolution, Napoleon, and 2 world wars. This pattern wasn't unique to France. China has thousands of years of wars and rebellions driven by salt taxes. During the American Civil War, the Confederacy nearly lost, not from lack of weapons, but from lack of salt to preserve food for their troops. And then came one man who used salt itself to bring down an empire. Not through war, but by walking. Every story above follows the same pattern. The powerful control the salt, the powerless endure it. Until 1930, when a man named Mohandas Gandhi decided to break that pattern. Gandhi was an Indian lawyer who studied in England, fought racial discrimination in South Africa, and by 1930 had become the spiritual leader of India's independence movement. People called him Mahatma, great soul. His philosophy had one rule: never use violence no matter what. And he chose salt as his starting point. Because the British had monopolized all salt production in India, banned Indians from collecting their own salt even while living next to the ocean, and forced them to buy British salt at British prices with British taxes attached. Salt was the one thing the poorest Indians needed most. Not a luxury, not a decoration. Salt to eat, salt to preserve food. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi set out on foot from his ashram with 78 followers, walking 387 kilometers over 24 days toward the coastal village of Dandi. Along the way, thousands of Indians saw the procession, understood what was happening, and joined. What started as 78 people became tens of thousands by the time they reached the shore. When he arrived, Gandhi bent down and picked up a small lump of naturally crystallized salt from the beach. That was it. No long speech, no dramatic declaration. Just an old man picking up salt, which, under British law, was a criminal act. The British walked straight into the trap Gandhi had set from the beginning. Arrest him, and the whole world sees a colonial empire jailing an old man for picking up dirt. Don't arrest him, and their laws are publicly broken in front of international press. They arrested him, then arrested 60,000 other Indians who followed his lead. And that's when the fire spread across India. From one handful of salt on a beach in Dandi, millions of Indians stood up, refused to obey the salt laws, and flooded the coastlines to collect their own salt. The movement grew so large the British ran out of prisons. This wasn't an ordinary protest. This was the moment an entire empire realized it could not govern a people who had stopped being afraid. 17 years later, in 1947, India gained its independence. It all started with a handful of salt. For thousands of years, salt was something people were willing to die to obtain. Now it's killing people because they're eating too much of it. The WHO recommends adults consume no more than 5 grams of salt per day, about 1 teaspoon. The current global average is 10.8 grams, more than double. Excess salt is a direct cause of high blood pressure, stroke, and heart disease, contributing to nearly 1.9 million deaths every year worldwide. And here's the part that gets me. Most of the salt you consume daily doesn't come from the shaker on your table. It's hidden inside bread, sauces, canned foods, instant noodles, and most packaged products at the grocery store, without you even realizing it. Our ancestors walked for days to find salt. They fought, revolted, and bled for the right to have it. And here we are, paying to eat too much of it without even knowing. From prehistoric people walking for days just to find a handful of salt, to Roman soldiers getting a dedicated budget to buy it, to French citizens executed for daring to smuggle it, to a 60-year-old man walking 387 kilometers to pick up a lump of mud and shake an empire to its foundation. And now that same substance sits hidden inside almost everything you eat. More than your body needs, more than you even realize. The history of salt isn't the history of a seasoning. It's the history of power, survival, and the lengths people were willing to go for something you casually reach for every single night at dinner. Next time you grab the salt shaker, remember that. If this video changed the way you think about something you use every day, hit that like button. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring the insane history of ordinary things around us. See you in the next one.